Top 10 reasons Shakespeare did not write Shakespeare. Keir Cutler, the real Shakespeare. There never was an Elizabethan playwright named William Shakespeare. There was an Elizabethan actor by the name of William Shaxper, or Shakespeare, born in Stratford-upon-Avon, England. When academics speak of the historical William Shakespeare, they are referring to this actor. There is no evidence to show that William Shakespeare was a writer. There are no original manuscripts of the plays or the poems, no letters, and only 6 shaky signatures, all in dispute. Both his parents, John and Mary, were illiterate. His wife, Anne Hathaway, was illiterate. His children were illiterate, which would make Shakespeare the only prominent writer in history whose children are known to have been illiterate. The actor from Stratford never went to college and, as far as can be determined, never had any schooling. There has never been an attempt by Stratfordians to surmise that William Shakespeare attended a grammar school in Stratford. No records of this exist, and Shakespeare made no mention of this school in his will, a startling oversight if this grammar school was single-handedly responsible for creating perhaps the most literate, scholarly man of all time. The lack of any letters written by William Shakespeare is particularly significant. As a great writer, it is likely he would have written a large number. Voltaire's collected correspondence totals roughly 20,000 pieces. Shakespeare's collected correspondence totals exactly 0 items. The pen name. In Elizabethan times, Shakespeare meant shake a spear. Shaking a spear is a reference to the Greek goddess of theater, Pallas Athena, also known as spear shaker. This goddess is always depicted carrying a spear, hence the pen name Shakespeare. Many plays not credited to William Shakespeare appeared under the nom de plume Shakespeare, including The London Prodigal, The Second Maiden's Tragedy, The Puritan, The Widow of Watling Street, The Comedian of Georgia Green, Fareham, The Miller's Daughter, The Birth of Martin, The Arraignment of Paris, and The Mere Devil of Edmonton. Since these plays are not believed to have been written by the mythical William Shakespeare, clearly at least one other writer using the pen name Shakespeare was using the pen name Shakespeare. His vocabulary. The works attributed to Shakespeare contain one of the largest vocabularies of any single English writer. John Milton's Paradise Lost, for example, was about 8,000 different words. The King James Version of the Bible, inspired by God and translated by 48 of Great Britain's greatest biblical scholars, has 12,852 different words. There are 29,066 different words in Shakespeare's canon. There's a startling incoherence between the story of a young man with, at best, a grammar school education, wandering into England, getting involved in theater, and then suddenly, even miraculously, possessing one of the greatest vocabularies of any individual who ever lived. The famous doubters. It is now academic dogma to believe William Shakespeare wrote the works. Despite evidence that Shakespeare could not have been a writer, few colleges or universities ever touched on the authorship question. Nevertheless, the case against William Shakespeare's authorship is strong enough to have attracted many famous individuals. A partial list of the Shakespeare doubters include Mark Twain, Sigmund Freud, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Charles Dickens, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Thomas Hardy, Oliver Wendell Holmes, Walt Whitman, Otto von Bismarck, Benjamin Disraeli, James Joyce, James Barrie, Charlie Chaplin, Orson Welles, John Gielgud, John Galsworthy, Leslie Howard, Daphne du Maurier, Malcolm X, Helen Keller, Derek Jacobi, U.S. Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens, and Henry James, who wrote, "I am haunted by the conviction that the Divine William is the biggest and most successful fraud ever practiced." His noticed death. Mark Twain, in his hilarious 1909 debunking of the Shakespeare myth titled "Is Shakespeare Dead?", points out that no one in England took any notice of the death of the actor William Shakespeare. His death was not even an event in the little town of Stratford. Does this mean that in Stratford he was not regarded as a celebrity of any kind? His death made no more stir in England than the death of any other forgotten theater actor would have made. Nobody came down from London. There were no lamenting poems, no eulogies, no national tears. A striking contrast with what happened when Ben Jonson and Francis Bacon and Spenser and Raleigh and the distinguished folk of Shakespeare's time passed from life. No praiseful voice was lifted for the lost bard of Avon. Twain concluded that the man who wrote Shakespeare's works could not have been William Shakespeare. not a single book. William Shakespeare's will is 4 pages long and handwritten by an attorney. In these 4 pages, there is no indication that he was a writer. The will mentions not a single book, play, poem, or unfinished literary work, or scrap of manuscript of any kind. The absence of books in the will is telling, since to write his works, the mythical William Shakespeare would have had to access to have had access to hundreds of books. The plays are full of expertise on a wide variety of subjects, including contemporary and classical literature, multiple foreign languages, a detailed knowledge of Italy, Italian language and culture, the law, medicine, military matters, sea navigation, painting, mathematics, astrology, horticulture, music, and a variety of aristocratic sports like bowls and falconry. What happened to the hundreds of valuable books he would have assumedly collected during his lifetime? An exhaustive search of every bookcase within 50 miles of Stratford, done in the 18th century, failed to find a single book formerly belonging to the world's greatest author. Multilingual. The writer of Shakespeare's plays had command of not only English, but Latin, Greek, French, Italian, German, Spanish, and other languages. His French, in particular, is not of the classroom, but reflects the vulgar speech of ordinary people. There are themes and passages from classical works untranslated in Shakespeare's day. Among many examples, the Comedy of Errors, was based on a Latin play by Plautus, of which there was no translation. The thousands of new words Shakespeare added to the English language were created from his multilingual expertise. There is no way of reconciling the immense scholarship evinced in Shakespeare's works with William Shakespeare, who from birth was surrounded by illiterate people, had little or no education, and is believed never to have traveled outside England.